All right, so Troy Haynes here from I Am Connected. I'm really excited and privileged to be here with really two esteemed gentlemen. Robert Waggoner, he wrote the acclaimed book Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Inner Self. It's now in its 15th printing. He co-authored an award-winning book, Lucid Dreaming, Plain and Simple, with Caroline McCready. And so the books are on Audible, Kindle, CD, MP3, and have been translated into French, German, Chinese, Korean, Czech, Finnish, and other language. You're past president of International Association for the Study of Dreams. So Robert, thanks for being here.
Troy, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
And also joining us as a co-host is my friend and colleague in the tech space, Brian Gillen from Tech for Dreaming. Brian recently started a new lucid dreaming community called Tech for Dreaming. This community is focused on the application of technology to make lucid dreaming more accessible to more people. He's been an avid lucid dreamer since 2014, logging hundreds of lucid dreams since then. These dreams opened his eyes to the potential of full lucid dreaming to open up a new platform to explore consciousness and the nature of reality. And that's something that I'm totally down for. I'm really a newbie in this space, so I feel really lucky to be here with, like an absolute expert in Robert and Brian, who is also very experienced. So welcome, Brian.
Yeah, thanks for having me here too. And I know we go back a ways from the Aura Ring. So that's like the day job there with the Aura Ring, which I know some of your community members are aware of too. Um, so it's kind of fun to work out, sleep in my day job, and then have various hobbies in the dreaming and lucid dreaming space outside of that. So happy to join.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and Aura's like I'm a huge fan of Aura, and most of the community that we have Auras. So it'd be great to get you back at some stage in the near future and just riff on what's new in Aura as well. But today we're going to talk about lucid dreaming, and I'm relatively new to it, but really excited for it because for me it's really just opening up the fundamentals, like that whole dreamscape. Um, I know a lot of people, they exist primarily in this waking state of consciousness and give very little attention to their dreaming state, and to the point where it can be quite dysfunctional. And so part of what we're doing at I Am Connected is helping to optimize their sleeping state as a fundamental level, but then what's possible. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, is the then what's possible. So Robert, yeah, thank you so much for being here. I have recently read your book, Lucid Dreaming, a gateway into the self, and it was the inner self. I found it absolutely fantastic. But before we sort of drop into like lucid dreaming, it would be great if you could tell us a little bit more about yourself and what drew you to the life of lucid dreaming practice and exploration.
Right. So I was a young guy growing up in the middle of America in a large family. I had four older brothers and a younger sister, and I'm out there on the plains of Kansas where they grow wheat and all that. And but as a kid, I had a very interesting dream life. And maybe it's because my outer life was so boring that made my dream life so interesting. But one thing I noticed as a young person is occasionally I'd have precognitive dreams. Like I'd hear somebody say something in the dream, a strange sentence, and then 5 hours later I'd be playing with my friends and someone would say that strange sentence again. I thought, wow, I dreamt that this morning. I know I did. And so that's how I got deeper into dreaming, just because I noticed that dreams did not fit what the scientific paradigm and kind of the worldview was telling me. It was just, this is unexpected. So that's why I got into dreams as a young kid.
Yeah, wow, that's really cool. Like there's so many different like associations that we can draw between the dreaming space and the waking state, and I'm excited to explore those. What about you, Brian? What sort of got you into lucid dreaming?
Yeah, for me, it kind of came on like a tidal wave. So I had obstructive sleep apnea that got resolved in 2014, and right around that same time, I started meditating for the first time. So kind of building the metacognition muscle, if you will. And I think the combination of that just opened up this world of lucid dreaming, and I started having some profound lucid dreams, and then that just led me down the rabbit hole of reading more and more about it. And not just because Robert's on the call, but that was the first book I read on lucid dreaming, is Gateway to the Inner Self. And then, taking some lessons from that as far as like, how do you interact with dream figures, or how can you interact with dream figures and the awareness behind the dream. I took that into my dream life and tried it. And then that opened up all kinds of new profound dreams, which led me to read even more books on lucid dreaming and pretty much like read whatever I could on the topic. So I just kind of like gradually went further and further down this rabbit hole. And came in with a very kind of like skeptical and scientific mind. I still, maintain the kind of the scientific oriented mind, but like it's, some of those experiences I've had in lucid dreams are difficult to deny, that it seems like it's something that is outside of my, physical body, or it's kind of this non-local communication channel. I can get up to kind of this like 80 to 90% confidence. I still have this like kind of lingering 10% kind of skepticism sometime, but like it's very difficult to deny some of these dreams I've had, and only motivates me to kind of explore, further and further into this domain. And I'd be kind of curious, like Robert, when you started having those dreams as a kid, what kind of resources did you use to kind of like go deeper down the rabbit hole? Like there's probably less books available back then, right?
Hey, so you have to realize, so there I'm in the middle of America in a big family. We're going to church every Sunday. And I remember one time as a little kid sitting there in bed thinking, oh, if God exists in a timeless space, he's the same yesterday, today, and forever, then that's how a precognitive dream can happen, because God is outside of time. I remember having that thought at like age 10, and oh, that explains how precognitive dreams could happen. But that's how, that was kind of the framework as a young guy. But as I kept going deeper, it was when I was about 17 years old. I was in high school, and one of my brothers had come home from the university and gave me this book, Journey to Ixtlan by Carlos Castaneda. And so in that book, Castaneda, who's a UCLA graduate student in anthropology, he's met a shaman, and the shaman, Don Juan, tells him to find his hands in the dream state and realize he's dreaming. And I'm thinking, what? Where's the technique? Can you do that? And so there was no technique, but by that time, I'd taught myself self-hypnosis and various things. So I went to sleep. Before I went to sleep, I looked at my hands, and I sat there looking at the palm of my hands while telling myself in my mind over and over, tonight in my dreams, I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. Tonight in my dreams, I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. And I just say that for about 5 minutes and fall asleep. So on the third night of doing that, I'm walking through my high school hallway. And again, I'm in high school at the time. And all of a sudden, just like they're spring loaded, boom, my hands pop right in front of my face. And I go, my hands, this is a dream. And it was so wild to realize that those football player guys, they're dream figures. And I touched the wall, and it felt so cool and nubby, just like it should. But I knew it's made out of dream stuff. And so I step out of B Hall to the administration building, and now I'm looking at the bricks and the bricks have such incredible detail. And then I did something that Don Juan told Carlos not to do. And that's, I started staring at just one spot of the bricks, just examining the detail. And all of a sudden, the lucid dream was getting shaky, like it was going to fall apart. And Don Juan said, oh, if it ever feels like it's going to fall apart, look back at your hands to renew the power of dreaming. So I looked back at my hands, but this time I became a little dot of light floating through the palm prints of my hands that were like some giant Grand Canyon. The palm print of my hands were like Grand Canyons. And I was this little dot of light floating through. And I was just like, whoa, this is just too wild. And then boom, I popped back to regular size, decided to go flying, flew about 10 feet, got so excited, I woke up. But that was my first consciously induced lucid dream. And this was back in 1975, which was about 5 or 6 years before the scientific evidence for lucid dreaming came out.
Wow. And then that's a key point, though. This is actually been scientifically validated. So lucid dreaming is actually a phenomenon. It's been verified. Can you talk a little bit about like what happened there? How do they do that?
Yeah, I'll never forget. I was at the university and I was a psychology student, and I got January 1981 Psychology magazine, and there's an article about an interview with Stephen LaBerge, who was one of the first researchers to validate lucid dreaming. And so what he did, he realized he himself had had lucid dreams, but he didn't know how to express it so that others in the scientific community would accept it. So then he realized that in lucid dreams, or in dreaming, we have rapid eye movement. And he thought, what if he brought himself into the sleep lab and told everyone that when he became lucid, he'd move his eyes left to right 8 times. That would get recorded on the rapid eye movement polygraph pad readout. And it would be so unusual to see left, right 8 times in a row that would provide the evidence. And so he brought himself into the sleep lab and did that like 20 times, and then he presented the evidence. But also over in the UK, Keith Hearn in England had done basically the same experiment 2 years earlier with a lucid dreamer, Alan Worsley. And he, in the spring of 1975, when I had my first consciously induced lucid dream, had done the same thing, became lucidly aware, moved his eyes left to right 8 times and all. So the scientific evidence was basically undeniable, even though people hassled him for 2 years, when they finally released it. I mean, they just couldn't believe that you could become consciously aware in the dream state.
And that's for me, that's the big interest in this. And I'm really at the beginning stages of this, so I feel really privileged to be on this call with both of you, is to be conscious in the unconscious, and then to even explore beyond that. Could you talk a little bit about, and Brian, feel free to jump in at any time, like talk a little bit about the construct of the dream, because I know there's dream figures and there's aspects of the dream, but then there's that which is behind the dream as well. Like, and you talk about that in your book. Could you sort of drop into that a little bit for us?
Yeah, so the great thing for me was having 5 or 6 years where I could explore lucid dreaming without really knowledge or interference from anyone else. I hardly had any resources. Even the Castaneda books at that time weren't really much of a resource. But what you learn at first is you are becoming aware within the unconscious. And then what you begin to realize is that it's a principled realm. And so almost every lucid dreamer will discover that they have to keep their emotions within a certain range, because if they get too excited, they'll pop out. Or if you stare at something fixedly in the lucid dream, all of a sudden that lucid dream will get shaky and it'll collapse and you'll wake up. And so you begin to see, wait a second, it's a principled state. And later when you talk to lucid dreamers like Brian and others, that they all say basically the same thing, that they realize those principles exist. But then as I went deeper, I began to see that, lucid dreaming is also reflecting my beliefs and expectations. So here's an example. I become lucid, I look around, I stabilize the lucid dream, and then I decide to fly through the wall to go exploring. So if I fly up to the wall, completely aware and believing that it's made out of dream stuff and I can fly right through it, boom, I'll fly right through it. But if I fly up to the wall and think, wait a second, that looks really thick or hard, then I'll bounce off of it. The lucid dream will reflect back to you your beliefs and expectations.
Wow.
And so then you begin to realize that you don't control the lucid dream so much as you relate to it. You influence things, you manipulate things, but a lot of the manipulation isn't out there. It's really your own beliefs and expectations. And so I began to learn, the importance of belief, expectation, the importance of focus and intent. And that's how I was basically going along for the first, 9 or 10 years. But then, like Brian said, I had a giant discovery. I was part of a lucid dreaming group where every month we had a goal to achieve. And that goal in March of 1985, this went on for 3 years. The goal that month was find out what the dream figures in your lucid dream represent. And so I became lucidly aware, followed a woman into an office. There's 3 women and a gentleman in a 3-piece suit. I walk up to the gentleman in the 3-piece suit and I said, "Excuse me, what do you represent?" And instead of the gentleman responding, a voice boomed out, a partial response, just from high above him. And I said, "What?" So I repeated the partial response and said, "What?" And then the voice, like it had to think about it, and then it boomed out the full response and explained what this gentleman represented. So I woke up, I decided, okay, I've got my goal. I'm going to wake up, write that down before I forget it. But the next day I began to wonder, why did the dream figure not respond? Why did the voice from up above respond, the non-visible voice? And that's when I had this revelation that maybe there's an awareness behind the dream. And so after that, in my lucid dreams, I would ignore the dream figures, ignore the dream setting, and I would shout out questions to the awareness behind the dream. "Hey, dream, show me something important for me to see." And sometimes the entire lucid dream would change, or sometimes one little thing would appear. And I began to ask to explore concepts and ask to explore information outside of my own knowing. And just like Brian's experience, the creativity and the wisdom and the insight of this awareness behind the dream, it blows your mind. I mean, it really makes you question the nature of things, but you really feel like you're getting in touch with your larger self or your inner self or something like that. Is that what you found, Brian?
Yeah, it's pretty similar. It's like and I got the idea from you, and I kind of like the idea that you didn't have as many books as reference points, so you kind of had to get at it from your own perspective and learn along the way. And I think that comes with some advantages too, where you're not kind of already programmed into like doing things a certain way. But I was fortunate to get that tip from you and kind of talk to the awareness behind the dream, and borrow some of your like commands, if you will. It's like you're almost like a programmer, and you're like programming like what do I want the dream to become by like sending out these commands to the awareness in the dream. And maybe for Troy's community, like maybe Robert, you could like just kind of mention a few of like the commands that you would recommend people try out if they become lucid in a dream. Like what are some kind of interesting ways to interact with that awareness?
Yeah, because sometimes this is a big issue for people. And I'll tell you why I can tell it's a big issue, because I for the last 20 years, have created an online magazine, the Lucid Dreaming Experience. And sometimes people will send in what happens to them. They'll become lucid, they'll stabilize the lucid dream, they'll remember they want to interact with the awareness behind the dream. And then it's like they can't speak. And oftentimes you can just see, if you have any kind of psychological framework, that the people are concerned about engaging what's basically their larger awareness, and that kind of freezes them up. That's why they can't speak. So that's why there's a wonderful woman who began World of Lucid Dreaming website there in New Zealand. She said that when she read my book, she got a little bit concerned about this larger awareness. So this is what she did. Instead of show me something important for me to see, she became lucid. She was standing out on the roadway and she shouted out, "Hey, dream, show me something hilarious." And she said, all of a sudden, this gorilla figure appears up the road, and it's multicolored, like, it's made out of shag carpeting, and it has this groovy walk, and it's walking down the road in her lucid dream. And she said she just burst out laughing. It was so hilarious. And so that's why I encourage people, if you have those kind of concerns, start at the baby step. Hey, dream, show me something hilarious. Hey, dream, hey, dream, show me something important for me to see. Because when you start out at that level, then you realize that lucid dreaming is really about more aware relating. Not only are you relating to the dream figures and the dream with more awareness, but now you're also relating to this awareness behind the dream. You're basically your larger awareness with greater awareness. And so you can continue to play with this. Like, for example, one time I became lucid and I shouted out, "Hey, dream, show me my life as if it was a painting." And I'll tell you, Troy, in a microsecond, here's a 30-meter by 15-meter painting hanging in the sky, fully decked out with all sorts of incredible, beautiful symbols, like some medieval tapestry thing. And I'm just blown away. I think, imagine the creativity that was required to pull that together
Wow.
in a microsecond.
Mm.
And that's when you realize, if you're following the creativity, this larger awareness, it just blows your minds when you see that. But like Brian's kind of hinted at, what even blows your mind more is sometimes when you get responses that are outside of your own knowing, and then later you verify them in the waking state. That's when you go, there's something going on here. This larger awareness is connected, and I'm part. The larger awareness is part of me, so it's not, some old man on a mountain top or something. That we're actually connected to greater knowing than we realize.
And so I guess what's coming up for me, sorry, Brian, did you want to say something?
Oh no, I was just gonna, plus one that, and we could get into stories, I'm sure, for hours around like some of those kind of precognitive dreams, or like this kind of information that's seemingly outside of things that I've known before too. So just kind of confirming what Robert said. And one tip as far as like kind of things to do to interact with the larger awareness behind the dream that's at least been helpful for me is, in my dream journal, I keep like, what are my goals for if I become lucid in a dream? Like, how am I actually going to interact with the dream, and like go into the dream state with the intention to do those things. And it helps too, because like you'd be surprised when you get into a lucid dream, sometimes you forget what you want to do, and then you just end up flying around and having kind of meaningless conversations with dream figures. And it feels like, oh man, I had this wonderful opportunity to like really explore the lucid dream, and then I kind of blew it. So if you have kind of a list of goals, and like maybe what you could do is borrow a few these kind of like commands that Robert talks about, and kind of list out like, okay, when I become lucid, I'm going to call out to the greater awareness that hey, dream, can you stabilize this dream for me? Can you make sure like this remains stable for a bit? Or like, can you show me a way that I can be a better version of myself? Or like kind of have like a list of like, what are my objectives before going in? I think that's a good, kind of a good practice to do before going in.
Well, yeah. So while we're riffing on this, like, I did want to just take a step back, but while we're on this, like some of the intentions that Robert sort of shared in his book, that you can bring once you're lucid in a dream, include like interacting with the dream figures, and looking for insights, communing with that aware unconscious, which is kind of what we've been talking about, that which is behind, having OBEs, out of body experiences, being precognitive, so knowing stuff that's not even has happened yet, remote viewing, healing. It seems boundless, like the things that you can actually do in a lucid dream. And I sort of wanted to just sort of talk around some of the more profound experiences that you guys have had. And like it seems like it's almost unlimited what you can actually do in a lucid dream. um, I wondered if you could sort of drop into that for me for a moment, like some of the more profound experiences that you've had, whether it's an OBE, whether it's knowing something that hasn't been happened yet, or remote viewing, healing, like.
Right, right. So what I tell people when I give interviews and interact is that lucid dreaming to me seems an open platform. If you want to explore space and time, you can explore space and time. If you want to explore modern physics, you can do that. If you want to explore the nature of dream figures, you can do that. It's just a wide open book. And I do want to say that even before the scientific evidence emerged in around 1980 about lucid dreaming, there's thousands of years of history in spiritual traditions. So for example, in Buddhism, there's Buddhist dream yoga, which uses lucid dreaming as its primary technique. And now it's married with Buddhist philosophy to explore things, and keep going deeper until you achieve a state of non-duality. And in Sufism, they use lucid dreaming to connect to the divine. There's even a secret society in Taoism. One time in a lucid dream, I met these guys who were all these black silk robes. And when I woke up, I wrote to some of my friends who have been to Asia a lot. And I said, who are the guys in the black silk robes? And they told me, oh, they're Taoists. And I said, Taoists do lucid dreaming? And they go, oh yeah, there's a secret society of Taoists who are into lucid dreaming and OBEs, but you'd never know about it unless you were deep, into those spiritual traditions. So, that's we could spend hours just talking about the spiritual aspect of it, but the profound thing of it is this: you become lucidly aware, you stabilize the lucid dream, and then you realize that what hinders you are your beliefs and expectations. So I'll give you an example. I talk about in my first book that this young guy, Ian, he was a college student in Florida. He writes me and he says, "You really think you can get information outside of your own knowing in a lucid dream?" And I write back and I said, "I know I can, and I know you can. You just have to give it a try." So he sets up an experiment with a girl in his dorm there, and the girl says, "I have a weird freckle on my back. When you become lucidly aware, you come and find the weird freckle, and then in the morning, we'll see if you got it right." And so he says, great. So he becomes lucid later that week, and he steps outside of his dorm, and now he's in the hallway, and all these people, the other dorm residents are yelling at him, "You're not dreaming, this is real. Get back to your room." And he called them distractors because they were, this was kind of a representation of his uncertain mind, were being reflected in those symbols. And so finally they got into his head so bad that he woke up. So he decided he's going to give it another try. The next week he becomes lucid, and this time, instead of going out into the hallway, he calls for the woman to come to him, and suddenly the door opens and it's this woman, and she's wearing a t-shirt, and he says, "Okay, show me your freckle." And she pulls up her shirt, and it's right above her rump, right above her rear. And he was really surprised because he thought that it would be on her side. Anyway, he sees it, wakes up in the morning, in physical reality, goes down, knocks on her door. He says, "Okay, last night in a lucid dream, I saw your freckle, a weird freckle." And she said, "Okay, let me put on a t-shirt." She puts on a t-shirt. She says, "You put your finger on the t-shirt where you think it is." And he puts it right above her rump, right where he thinks saw it in the lucid dream. She pulls up her shirt, and his fingers touching the freckle. And so when you have those experiences, you realize that sometimes you have to work through your own disbelief, your own inner things that'll be expressed as factors. And so it's just not as simple as, oh, here you are in Aladdin's, castle, and now you can do whatever you want. You have to work through your own beliefs, your own expectations, your own focus and intent. And sometimes that can really play a mind game on you. So that's why I want to make it clear that it's more complicated.
Yeah, that makes sense. Brian, did you want to jump in on anything there?
Yeah, I think like there's a lot of those kind of examples, and I think maybe one good one for Robert to get into too is around the potential for physical healing within a lucid dream. Like somehow, whether that's through a mind-body connection or through another mechanism. I know the I Am Connected community is interested in this kind of. There's definitely an overlap with kind of this biohacker community. People that want to improve their mental and physical state. So I'm wondering. Yeah, Robert, if you could talk a little bit about like potential for physical healing in lucid dreams.
Right. I think the potential for physical healing and even emotional healing are just phenomenal in lucid dreams. And so in both of my books, I have chapters on how people go about it. And in my first book, I give about a dozen examples of successful lucid dream healings. And then I give 2 or 3 examples of people who failed and show why they failed because they approached it in a unhelpful way. But basically what happens are simple things like this. You have a physical ailment, you become lucidly aware, you stabilize the lucid dream. Then, like Brian says, it always helps to have a plan of how you're going to do the healing before you get into the lucid dream. So something you figured out in the waking state. So for example, a simple one was a woman had plantar warts on her feet. They were so painful. For a month, she'd been trying to visualize these things to go away, but they just wouldn't go away. Finally, a friend encouraged her to do it in a lucid dream. She became lucid, stabilized the lucid dream. And so in her lucid dream, she created a ball of light between her hands. And in the lucid dream, she put the ball of light on her feet, intending for them to be healed. And when she woke up, overnight, all the plantar warts had turned black, and within 10 days, they all fell off and never returned. So that would be a simple example. But there's another example by one of to a sleep lab because she's a phenomenal lucid dreamer. So she went to the doctor. The doctor said, you have a large cyst and a mass in your uterus and ovaries, and so come back in a week and we're going to check that out. And so that week she became lucid, and I want to show you the progression of what happened. So the first thing, she went up to a dream figure and said, what do you think about me having this large cyst and mass in my uterus? And the dream figure is like, I don't know. I mean, just gibberish. And so that's why I encourage people, don't ask dream figures important questions. I mean, they're just random. It's like asking a random stranger on the street. Don't do that. So then she does what I think would have been my first step. She just looks up and shouts out to the awareness behind the dream, hey, what does this mean that I have this large cyst and mass? And she said, all of a sudden, when she addressed the larger awareness, she sees planes falling out of the sky, skeletons appear, car crashes, police. She said she's seen all these kind of death and dismemberment kind of imagery. And so she thinks, oh man, this is really serious. And she wakes up. She goes, falls asleep again into a new lucid dream. And now she's with her son, and her son and her both see that there's these large lights, geometric lights of color in the sky. And her son is worried, and she goes, no, don't worry, they've come to heal me. And when she says that, all of a sudden these geometric forms of light begin to shoot light into her, and she feels this incredible intense healing and wakes up. It's either the next day or 2 days later, she goes to the doctor. She no longer has an expanded uterus, no longer has a large cyst and mass. They've just disappeared. So there's various ways of approaching this. What I love in my magazine, the Lucid Dreaming Experience, I get almost monthly or every issue, someone will send in a lucid dream healing. In one of the last issues, there was a guy who had pigment dispersion syndrome on his eye. And so this happens to young guys who are like 30 or 40. The pigment falls off of their eye, and then it clogs up the duct of their eye. And then so much pressure builds up in their eye that literally they can lose their eyesight and go blind. So he went to the doctor. The doctor said, oh man, your eyes have gotten a lot worse. I want you to come back in a few months and get another test. And during that time, he decides to have a lucid dream. And in the lucid dream, he puts his hand up on his eye, intending for it to be healed, sees this brilliant white light, and he wakes up. Now he goes to the doctor, and now the doctor is stunned at the results. The results are basically like what his eyes were like 8 years ago. And somehow his pigmentation is much better. And he says there's been a spontaneous remission. And the young man says, do you want me to explain how I did it? And the doctor listened to him talk about lucid dreaming. And the doctor says, I don't know what happened. All I know is that there's been a spontaneous remission. And I'll tell you, in this kind of area, that just hardly ever happens. So, wow. So you just start to collect these stories of people after people who've had physical healings. But then there's stories of people who've had emotional healings. And I just want to tell you, I know I'm going on for a long time here, Troy, so I apologize. So I'm in Bogota, Colombia, and I'm doing a weekend workshop on lucid dreaming. And in the front row is this woman who she's probably 40 years old. She has all this pain etched in her face. Have you ever met anyone who just has pain in their face? You can just see it etched in their face. Young, attractive woman, all that. And I know she's a good lucid dreamer because through the translator, she's asking great questions that only a good lucid dreamer would ask. So 6 months later, they have me come back to Bogota, give another workshop, and this woman walks in through the door. But now 70 or 80% of the pain is gone from her face. She looks like a new person, younger, more attractive, the whole thing. And I walk up to her and I ask her, what happened to you? And she said, I had never thought of using lucid dreaming to heal emotional trauma. That concept had never occurred to me. But after I heard you at the first workshop, I did exactly what you said. I created a plan. Then in my next lucid dream, I stabilized it. I remembered my plan. I did my plan. And now you can see what's happened to me. And she said, you know what's interesting, Robert? I can still remember the events that happened in my life, but now they have no pain. Now they have no pain.
Wow.
And I'll tell you, it's wild when you meet people who have used these for serious emotional trauma healing, because a lot of people carry that with them for 60, 70, 80 years. And I was just so happy for her.
That's awesome. So it makes me really become aware of like the importance of the intention that we bring as we go into the lucid dream, like the power of intention. And you mentioned in your book about being super specific, even including the languaging, because that can determine, like, have a direct impact on the results. So can you talk a little bit more about like the intention? Brian sort of talked a little bit about this as well, about even preparing, like you talked about it at the beginning, like setting the intention to actually have a lucid dream, but then setting the intention of what you're actually going to do, what's the goal within the dream. Yeah, and then even like are you going to interact with the dream figures? Like for me, dream figures have always been representation of, for the most part, people in my life. So are they not people in my life? That's probably a separate question, but are they actually just dream figures? And then there's obviously that which lies behind the dream as well. So I guess there's a couple of questions in there. It's like intention, like can we talk a little bit about intention, because it seems like as important in this dreamscape as it may be in our waking state. And then I'll sort of want to unpack a little bit more about some of the like dream figures and so forth, what they actually represent.
Yeah, so the wonderful questions. Intent becomes so important as you go down the path of lucid dreaming. You know, like Brian mentioned, normally at the beginning, you just use lucid dreaming to have fun. You fly around, you talk to dream figures. Maybe one day you figure out, wow, you know, maybe you could have lucid dream sex, and then you're seeing, oh my God, that's incredible too. And so you just get caught up. I mean, that's part of the problem with lucid dreaming. You can spend all your time on just stupid stuff. I mean, literally, and have a lot of fun with it. And I'll tell you, there are a lot of people who do that. In fact, when my first book came out, people wrote me and said, oh, you know, I'd read all of Stephen LaBerge's book and all, but I never, you know, after I had all that lucid dream sex, I just didn't realize, you know, what's the bother? What's interesting? And now I've read your book, and now my mind is blown. So the intent matters, because if your intent is to have fun, you can have loads of fun in a lucid dream. If your intent is to understand the true nature of reality, then I'll tell you, you're going down a serious pathway. If your intent is to heal your physical body, it can be so fascinating. Troy, there's examples of people in the process of healing their physical body, they realized first they needed to heal their emotions. And when you read some of these stories, you go, oh my God, oh, this is so wild. But it's just, it shows you how the unconscious works, and that sometimes you got to heal the emotional self, or heal the belief, or let go, forgive, or whatever it is, before the physical healing can take place. So the intent becomes all important. But also, you're right about dream figures. Dream figures are really compelling because we're very social people in the world, and we always, you know, you interact with other people. That's what you do. But in a lucid dream, you realize that dream figures vary. Some cannot respond to a question, or they respond with gibberish or just random words. Others, you can see in their eye that they're actually very aware, and sometimes they'll give you some interesting advice. Sometimes it's a little bit bizarre, but it's still interesting. And then there's other dream figures, like you meet a deceased relative, and when you see your deceased aunt and you go up and ask her, you know, do you realize that we're in a dream? Or tell me something outside of my knowing, or tell me something about the family, and you hear what they have to say, then you go, oh my God, there's really something going on here. And then there's other dream figures. I call them independent agents. So like one time I was walking down a pathway and I come to the bottom of the path and a big river valley now, and there's people dressed up in 15th century French clothing. And I think, what the heck? And I become lucid. Then I look at myself and I'm wearing green leotards and a green and white silk shirt. And I realize, oh my God, these are my people. I go up to them and I ask each of them, would you like to fly? Finally, this woman is sure she'd like to fly. And she grabs my wrist and takes me flying. And she's dragging me all up and down this valley. It was absolutely hilarious. So you realize that there's all dream figures vary and all. But truly, your intent will decide where you want to go and how deep you go on the lucid dreaming path.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. There seems to be different levels of dream figures and different levels of the dream itself too. Like I know there's sometimes the dream feels more solid, or kind of more or less susceptible to my intentions or expectations to be able to shift it. Like sometimes it's very malleable, sometimes it's very like solid. So I don't know, Robert. I don't know if could you talk a bit about like do you think there's these kind of different levels of lucid dreaming as far or different levels of the dream, and maybe like how that could even layer up into what we call waking reality? Maybe there's a layer above this too, and then maybe like this is a more solid version of a lucid dream where our intention, we can set it, but maybe it doesn't manifest anything, you know, for a decade or two, or maybe like even further into the future. So maybe I could have you speculate a bit on kind of levels of the lucid dream. And one more kind of layer on top of that real quick too is I've noticed sometimes when I meditate within a lucid dream, it almost like brings me into a deeper layer where I'm more prone to have false awakenings on the way back up. So I'm in this kind of the dream fabric kind of tears, and I'm in this kind of like cosmic sea of bliss kind of situation. And then I'm prone to like false awakenings where I'm trying to write the dream down in the dream journal, but then I wake up realizing I was dreaming about writing it down in the dream journal. So it's almost like you have to go up a few layers to get back. So anyways, maybe you could talk a little about like kind of layers of dreams and reality.
I'll just say this is all so very awesome, man. I love this question.
I know that there's some people who are listening to this talk about lucid dreaming for the first time, and they're probably a little bit blown away. I do want to explain just a little bit of the terminology here. So basically, there's three ways that a lucid dream comes to an end. Oftentimes, you'll get too excited and you'll wake up, or you'll stare at something, and the lucid dream will become unstable. You'll wake up. So the first way is you just wake up in bed. But the second thing that happens sometimes is what Brian was talking about. You have false awakenings. And so normally that happens, I think, to people who have probably already had 5 or 10 lucid dreams at least. And so what happens is you realize the lucid dream is coming to an end, and then you think you've woken up, and you might roll over into bed to write down the lucid dream. And then you look and realize, wait a second, we have pink carpeting. When did we get pink carpeting? This is crazy. And then you realize, oh, you're still dreaming. And so that's what you call a false awakening. And normally you wake up from that. The third thing that happens, and this is another area that shows that this dreaming, there's more to it, there's an objective aspect to it, is what people call you go into the void. And so the lucid dream collapses, the visuals collapse, but now you're in this space of just kind of this sparkling black phosphorescent void, and nothing seems to happen there. If you hold on to your awareness though, and you might need to grab your arm, even though you can't see your arm in this sparkling blackness, if you hang out long enough, you'll watch the birth of a lucid dream. So I'll tell you, you'll be looking at the sparkling void, and then suddenly a green bush will appear there, and oh, a car appears there, and a house on a hill appears there, and now there's a forest over there. And you'll watch the birth of a dream, a birth of a lucid dream. And so that's why I think we have rapid eye movement. Oh, I'm looking at the bush. Oh, I'm looking at the car. Oh, I'm looking at the hill. These things are popping around, and that's explains what happens at the birth of a dream. But nobody knows what really has happened. I mean, but I'm quite certain that that's what happens. So sometimes you enter the void, and if you hang out long enough, you can watch a new lucid dream begin. But so Brian's question of kind of like levels of lucid dreaming shows you how complicated this can begin, because sometimes people will hear this and they go, oh, what these guys are talking about is out-of-body experiences. And I want to say that no, that's not the case. So imagine you are in a car accident in physical reality, you're rushed to the hospital, and now you're floating up in the ceiling, watching them try to revive your body. You know, where do you realize within a dream that you're dreaming? You just, you've had a car accident. Or you might be falling asleep and you hear this humming and buzzing around your head, and suddenly you're viewing the bedroom from 6 feet above your bed. That's an out of body. That is not realized within the dream that you're in. So these are two different things, but they're quite similar because they're kind of like a mountain lion and a house cat. They share some characteristics because the mind is so important in out of bodies and also lucid dreams. But here's one way of changing the levels. Become lucidly aware and shout out, "Hey dream, take me to the next form." And for me, that normally means take me to an OBE, and boom, I'll be consciously aware in the house that I'm sleeping in, and then I'll go flying around the neighborhood and really just stun myself. And so that's a way of kind of shifting levels. Or some people will have sleep paralysis. They'll be laying there in bed and they'll think they're awake, but they can't move their body. They're really in a state of sleep paralysis. And my friend Ryan Hurd said that you can move from that state into a lucid dream by just imagining that you're flying over a nearby lake. Just imagine yourself flying over the nearby lake. And if you imagine hard enough and put enough mental energy into it, enough intent, then suddenly you'll find yourself flying over the nearby lake. You'll move into a lucid dream. So there's ways of shifting, your state of consciousness by using the power of intent, the power of your mind in the lucid dream state. But you can shift from a lucid dream into an OBE. And I also assume you can move from an OBE back into a lucid dream.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's kind of a positive spin on what could be a pretty scary thing in sleep paralysis, where oftentimes people report these kind of scary dark figures at their bedside, kind of like a menacing figure. But yeah, you can kind of jujitsu that to be like, okay, this is a sleep paralysis episode. I'm going to use this as a portal to get into a lucid dream. I also heard that with liminal dreaming. I know Jennifer Dumper writes about that in the book Liminal Dreaming too, as far as like you can use the kind of the hypnagogic state to be able to kind of you get these kind of fuzzy images as you're transitioning from wake to sleep, and sometimes you get attached to that and actually kind of ride that in from like the waking state right into the lucid dreaming state, and kind of what they call the wake induced lucid dream. So kind of some cool practices there. And Troy, if you're familiar with yoga nidra, there's quite a bit of kind of overlap with that as far as kind of lying on your back and doing the body scan thing. So that might be something that your community members could kind of adapt to their regular meditation practices too at nighttime. Like that maybe that's a good way for them to experiment with lucid dreaming.
Yeah, that's cool. Dropping into like what you were sort of suggesting though at the beginning is in this lucid dreaming space, when you set an intention, there's the opportunity for it to just to manifest and show up. Like how much what's the parallels, just sort of riffing off the question that you asked, Brian, what are the parallels then into this waking state in terms of setting intentions, and like how much do we speculate and feel like by really clear on our waking state, it seems slower. Sometimes it can manifest really quick in this waking state, and sometimes it can take like up to a decade, like Brian said. Like, what parallels do you think we can draw from intending in the dreaming scape and then intending in the waking state?
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's really powerful. When you realize, I call it living lucidly. When you realize that you can take the principles that you're learning in the lucid dream state and bring them into the waking state, then you begin to live more lucidly. Like here's an example of healing. So we all know that in a lucid dream, you could heal something, and in the morning, it might be 80, 90%, 100% taken care of. That's great. But about 10, 12 years ago, I realized that every year I was fearing what people here call hay fever. So it's basically an allergy, and you can't breathe, your sinuses get all clogged up, you can barely sleep, your throat, it's just a disaster. And I thought, wait a second, I know in a lucid dream, if I had the proper beliefs, expectation, and intent, I could heal this in a second. But I'm going to do it in the slow state of waking consciousness. And so this is what I did, Brian and Troy. Every time I began to fear August and September when I'd have hay fever, I'd tell myself, first I'd stop and become mindfully aware of it and say, no, not this year. Then I knew I had to plant what I wanted. And I'd say, this year, I will breathe easily and naturally. And I'd see myself breathing easily and naturally. So I'd go along my day, here comes the television. Oh, allergy season is coming, buy this drug. And I say, nope, nope, not this year. This year, I breathe easily and naturally. And I'll tell you, I did that for about 3 or 4 months. Here comes August, September. My symptoms were reduced 70%. Did it the next year, my symptoms were reduced 90%, the next year, 95%. Now I don't even think about August and September because I breathe easily and naturally. And I know it's possible because I see how the unconscious functions. If you believe it, expect it, and intend it, boom, it'll happen. And you can do the same thing. It's slower oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes. But if you do it consistently, you'll get it to happen. And so that's what I call living lucidly. You take that. But there's also another beautiful thing you can do, because some of your listeners are going to be asking, is all this a dream? Or, am I involved in a dream right now? Because a lot of us, we've read about the power of beliefs and, and all that. So in my second book, in the final chapter, I give people, and you don't have to be a lucid dreamer to try this, I give people a technique that they can show that they exist in a dream right now. And what is a dream first? A dream is a mental construct. That's what a dream is. It's not illusion or fantasy or whatever. It's a creation of the mind. And I'll tell you what's going on right now is in this waking reality, we're all involved in our own little bubbles, but also we're interacting with others, but it's in a mental creation. So this is what you do. You find in yourself a neutral belief. So for Troy, it might be in the world of beliefs, it's neutral in the characteristic of funny. He's not really funny, he's not unfunny, he's just right there neutral. In fact, he's so neutral about how funny he is, he just barely thinks about it. So this is what you do. About 10 times a day for 1 minute, tell yourself, I am the funniest person in this country. There's never been anyone funnier than me. I am hilarious. And just ramp it up. Imagine yourself talking, people bursting into laughter, pounding the table. You are hilarious. And then do it for 1 minute and stop. An hour later, when you have a free minute, do it for a minute, stop. And I'll tell you, what you're doing is creating mental energy around a belief. And what'll happen 4 or 5 days later, after you have to keep doing it each day, you'll be at the checkout lane at the store, you'll say something innocuous, and everyone will roar with laughter. And you'll think, that wasn't even funny. Or you'll go to work and you'll say something and people will awesome. Pound the table and die. I'll tell you, I do these 30-day workshops, and a woman, she told me she's like 55, lived on the island of Bermuda. She said that she just quit thinking about beauty. She left all that behind long ago, and now she's 55. So every day she told herself she was the most beautiful person in Bermuda, and blah, blah, blah. She said on day 4 of doing this, a guy in his 30s asked her for her phone number. She said that had not happened in 25 years. So what I'm trying to say is, when you energize a neutral belief, there's nothing stopping it. If you try to deal with your biggest life belief issue, like money or relationships or whatever, you got 20 years of thoughts energetically connected there. But when you take a neutral belief and energize it, within 4 or 5 days, you'll see it being expressed, and you'll realize, I'm a projector, and this is being reflected back to me. My own stuff is being reflected back to me. And that's when you'll realize, oh my God, I exist within a mental construct. And the only way to work through this is to start to be more mindful and more aware of what's going on inside here, because it's going to get reflected back. So anyway, that's in the final chapter of my second book, but you don't have to be a lucid dreamer to try it. Try it on your own, and I think you'll have your mind blown.
That's golden. Like I really love that. That's yeah, just created a whole nother like expectation for this reality that I exist in. And I probably haven't got time to go down this rabbit hole, but you talk in your book about you know, shared lucid dreams where you actually lucid dream with other people that are intending to meet up in lucid dreams, and it becomes this like phenomenon, and that's can be quite rare, but that happens. So that sort of is another layer to this conversation that you just said, that we're collectively in this dreamscape together. Everyone else is potentially just a dream figure as a representation of our own experience. I'm conscious that we're just we're over time. I did have a couple of questions that one of my clients did propose. I was hoping just to drop into those. Like, she's asked, like, once lucid, I had the intention of going to the beach, and instead I ended up in a sand dune in the desert. Does this happen because I had flickers of doubt and whether it would work, or was I incompletely visualizing where I would be? We kind of have already touched on this. Maybe it is about belief.
You know, if your focus, when you think about the beach, if your focus is the sand, then you might find yourself in the desert. And so I think that's probably what happened there. Is she thought, I want to be on the beach, and she thought about the sand, and the sand took her to the desert. That's what I would assume. But like Brian mentioned, and people notice this, the exact wording of your request matters. So like an artist gentleman, he would become lucid and announce, now I want to look for art that I can create in the waking world. It's been the entire lucid dream looking for art. And he realized he had to change his wording. And so he did, and he said, now I want to look at art I can create. And suddenly art would appear on nearby walls. And so just looking for art, you're wasting all your time. Looking at art, boom, it appears. And so it might have been she was focusing on sand, and the desert just had more mental power. I don't know, but it's something like that's going on.
And it does seem like there's different spectrums of control of lucid dreams. And I think, Robert, I think I actually saw this on one of your slides before, where it's the sailor does not control the sea, where they can kind of steer the ship, but sometimes they're susceptible, like what the dream, you know, like where the dream wants to steer them to. So like maybe then in that case, it was just like kind of a less flexible dream environment that she was dealing with, or it could be a combination of that with kind of like the wrong command, or like not strong enough expectations. So like there's kind of this multifactorial layering there.
But anyway, since she's a listener, I do want to give her credit for manifesting the desert. She got close. Now just add water and you're on the beach.
At least in our case.
Her other question was, and we kind of touched on this as well, interested in using lucid dreaming to help me expand my consciousness and understanding of the interconnectedness of the universe. Are there any specific exercises you would recommend doing for doing this?
So Brian had touched on this earlier. Here's what I would suggest if this is your focus. Become lucidly aware, stabilize the lucid dream, and I don't care where you are, in the middle of the highway, on the beach, in the desert, stop what you're doing and begin to meditate in the lucid dream. I'll tell you, within 20 or 30 seconds, you will go to the most profound depth that you've ever gone to. And for me, meditating in a lucid dreams means emptying my mind. And I'll tell you, you'll have utter, extraordinary, transcendent, profound experiences. So that's what I would suggest. Now, some people, when they meditate, they chant a mantra. And oftentimes in the lucid dream, it's like 1,000 others are chanting the mantra with them. And so that's might be what happened. But for me, empty your mind, and then you will see how deep you go. Now, the beautiful thing is this: if you do it enough, then you'll realize that in the waking state, it's changing you. Because what used to take you 20 minutes to get to this deep level now you're getting there in 5 or 6 minutes, because in the lucid dream, it's like you're clearing out all the whatever, and you're getting on the expressway, and you're learning how to get to these deeper levels. So that's what I would suggest if you want to discover that. There's a lot more in my book. I talk about how I came to realize that we exist in an interconnected oneness, and that even beyond phenomenal reality, there's a real reality that you can engage in a lucid dream. But basically what that means is letting go of self, all the beliefs, all the history, all the expectations, emotions and stuff, just let it go. And then with grace, you might have an experience of what others would call non-duality.
Thank you. I think we're pretty much at time. I don't want to hold you guys up. I want to thank you. You talk about the 5 stages of lucid dreaming in your book. So I want to encourage people to read your book, Lucid Dreaming, A Gateway into the Inner Self. It's a fantastic book. It's available on Audible. It's available in print, in Kindle as well, I imagine.
Right.
And so Lucid Dreaming Magazine, that's your magazine that you publish. How else can people follow your work, or do you do courses as well? How do people get started with this more effectively?
Yeah, you can always go to my book's website, lucidadvice.com. And if you want to check out the free online magazine, go to dreaminglucid.com. We have 20 years of issues. You can read other people's lucid dreams, articles, interviews. And I'll tell you, you'll just begin to realize, like Brian said, it's incredibly deep. Lucid dreaming is an open platform of incredible depth. So thank you so much for having me, Troy. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you. We could just riff for hours, I'm sure. Brian, Tech for Dreaming, do you want to just a bit of a quick shout out about Tech for Dreaming and where you're going? Because you're looking at how do we bring technology into this space to make lucid dreaming more accessible to more people more easily.
Yeah, exactly. And thanks for letting me join and co-host and facilitate the discussion and ask Robert a few questions here too. And Tech for Dreaming, it's a new community, like you said. It's focused on making this lucid dreaming state more accessible through the use of technology, and that could include things like supplements, devices, those kind of methods. And then from there, there's so much exploration that can be done in kind of this open platform, like we were talking about before. Even we're talking about healing and emotional and physical. Imagine if you can get a bunch of people in a clinical study format, trying this at scale, how powerful that would be. And that's the kind of thing that becomes opened up when you can make this lucid dreaming state more and more accessible. Quick plug for we do have our first event tomorrow night. We'll be joined by Karen Konkley from Northwestern University. She was the lead author at this two-way kind of dream communication study, where they actually communicated into the dream, and then the lucid dreamers communicated out of the dream. So she'll be joining us and talking through that study. We'll also be joined by Dashiell Barkus, who has a DIY lucid dream induction project, and she's planning to live tweet from a lucid dream. She's going to hook into the Twitter APIs and use Morse code with her eye movements and send a message from the lucid dream out to her Twitter account. And she was actually a participant in that Northwestern study. So we'll be able to get kind of the tag team of Karen talking about it from the researcher perspective, and then Dash talking about it from the participant perspective. So anyways, we'll plan to have at least one event per month. So I hope people will join us, and you can find us at techfordreaming.com, and I'm on Twitter, so feel free to reach out. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Brian. I really am confident that this whole lucid dreaming scape is going to change the paradigm, and particularly pointing back to what you were saying, Robert, the fact that we can prove that we're actually in a dream now, and how indifferent is it to what rules exist here that don't exist there. It's just such an exciting landscape to explore, and I just love that. Love to be able to spend time with you guys. You guys have been spending, veterans in this space, and you're leading a movement in technology in this space, Brian. So I just thank you both so much, and I hope to have another conversation with you both at some point in the very near future.
That'd be great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Troy.